Hello friends, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. And today I'm in Lightroom Classic editing a landscape, and I find that there's a few tools that I use on a lot of my landscapes in Lightroom. They're particularly powerful and accurate and useful. I'm going to walk through that in this video and show you why sometimes I open up Lightroom and start doing these edits and I kind of get blown away, to be honest, because especially one of these tools I love so much and I use so much. We're going to go get into that in this video. Let's get started. I've got this photo here. This is a landscape. It was a sunset along the Oregon coast, but it was a little bit gray. There's not a ton of color, but we're going to change that because these tools are so powerful. They really give you the ability to make a huge impact on your image. I always start here in the basic tab, and I just want to pull down the highlights a little bit and lift the shadows, which is really how I tend to start every edit these days, is playing with highlights and shadows first. And after I do that, I like to come back and add a little bit of contrast. I find that I get a better overall look when I do it that way, as opposed to like starting with contrast, for example. It's a personal preference, but it seems to work for me. Now, the other thing I want to do while I'm in basic is warm the photo up, and that is because, as you can see, it's fairly blue. I mean, there is some color in these clouds. There's going to be more in a few minutes when we make these edits that we're going to make in this video, but there's a little bit of color there. I'm going to bring up the warmth overall because it's just a little bit too blue for me, which is not something I say a lot because I really do like my blues. But one of the things I love about kind of bluish skies at sunset is that color contrast. You have that warm and cool interplay, and I want to bring that up in this video and in this photo. So I've warmed it up a little bit. If you look at the before and the current state, that's where we are. Now we're going to jump into a couple of these tools that I really love. Now, actually, before I jump into that, I do want to tell you, if you haven't yet got my free editing guide for Lightroom Classic, there's a link down below. It's 17 pages of information and tips, including some of the tips that we're going to talk about in this video with these tools. But it illustrates how I use Lightroom and some of the tools and what you can do with it. It's free just for anyone that subscribes to my newsletter if you want to check that out down below at that link. The first thing I like to do after I do my basic edits is usually go into masking, because masking for me is all about control. And once I've done my basic stuff in basic, I'm really at the point where I want to start controlling my edit. And one of the most frequent things I do to control things is, of course, use masking tools. I'm going to go in and I'm going to start with the luminance range mask. These are my favorite masks. I use them all the time. They're absolutely just delicious. I love them. And I don't know, it's just it's a thing for me. I just absolutely adore luminosity masks. And if you think about it, really what it does is it allows you to isolate the light in certain areas. And what I want to do is just kind of build this luminosity mask in order to give me a really nice focus on really those brighter parts. And so that's what I've done here. Now, I'll cover this some in that ebook that I talked about, but I've also got videos here talking about luminosity masks. But if you'd like to see more, just leave a comment down below and let me know. But the bottom line is you're building a mask based on light values. And so here I'm isolating the brighter tones, really kind of the highlights in the sky, because I want to warm these up. And so what I've done is I've condensed or crushed, for lack of a better term, the majority of the mask into those brighter areas. But this section here where I drag this triangle is basically, you can see, creating a fade. If it's like that, it's got this really rough edge where it's a very abrupt change from highlights to midtones. So what I want to do is start gently fading that out so it does cover more area, but it also creates a really smooth transition. And I think that's incredibly key when you're building a mask like this. So I've done that, and what I want to do is just increase the warmth because I'm amping up this sunset feel. Some do like maybe a 20, and that's really yellow looking. So I'm going to add a tint as well, somewhere around the same range, maybe a little bit higher. And so for me, that tint gets it away from just that kind of washed out light yellow. And again, we'll do a kind of a color grading move here in a minute to really bring those colors to life. But that helps quite a bit, I think, with the warmth and the tint. But then I'm also going to drag the saturation. I want these colors to really pop in that sunset. So I'm going to do like a high 30s, 38. The number is really immaterial, but the point is, I've isolated mostly just the sky, but also the reflections. So down here, these brighter parts, and that's because luminosity mask, right? It's based on light values. So the brighter parts are getting the edits that I made, which is a warmth increase, a tint increase, and a saturation increase. So before the luminosity mask, It's very muted in terms of that warm color. And then after the luminosity mask, you can see there's a lot more pop and a lot more going on with the warmth overall. I'm a big fan of that. So luminosity mask, my number one, my favorite thing. But the other thing I like to do, and another reason I like Lightroom so much, is what's called a color range mask. As the name implies there, it's a mask built on a range of colors. And usually what I do is I come in, and in this case, I'm going to pick something kind of warm, about like that. And once you click it, you'll see it builds a mask grabbing that color. Now you can redefine the range if you want to, but I'm just going to leave it right where it is. So I basically take those warmer colors, and now I'm going to do the same thing, right? Just a slight bit of warmth increase, so like a 4, very small, and a little bit more saturation. This is a 30. And so what I've done is basically taken 2 different ways to amp up the color in the sky and create that sunset warmth that I really want to accentuate in this edit. The luminosity mask, which isolated really the brighter parts, which is really where the warmth is, but then also I took the color that was warm and I made it warmer and a little bit more saturated. So I kind of doubled up on that to create this overall warm look. If I hide all the masks, you will see that it's much bluer, much lighter, really gray overall. But now with both of these masks in place and that overall warming that I've done to that area or those areas, I'm getting a much more kind of intense sunset. So I like that look. The numbers are immaterial and the amount is immaterial. It might be a little bit too orange. I'm actually going to make a color grade here in a sec to kind of refine that color look. But this is an idea that you can use on skies or other parts of a photo, but with luminosity mask and a color range mask, come in, isolate those areas, those colors, create a look that you want. So now that I've done that, I'm going to close the masking menu and I'm going to get into my tool, the tool that is really probably my favorite color tool in Lightroom, and that is calibration. I absolutely adore this tool. Once I've started using it now, I can't really stop using it. I find myself opening Lightroom. Honestly, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I open Lightroom just looking for something that I can do with calibration because I like it that much. If you've been here before, you know I love editing colors. I like big, bold colors and really stylized kind of images with a lot of color. Calibration does that for you, and it does it so, so well. There's 3 different sections, and this is not a full primer, so to speak, on calibration, but it's adjusting the RGB values in each pixel. So these blue, green, and red, they don't really do always exactly what you think they're going to do based on the color that they're named after. So what I usually do is just come in, experiment with them, and move the sliders around. In this case, I usually start with blue. I tend to start there for some reason and work my way up. So I'm going to do about a +20 on the blue saturation, but I'm going to change the hue. Instead of going to the right, you'll see it's kind of getting kind of that purple and yellow or green. I'm going to go the other way and get a bit more rich kind of red color. So something about like that. That's a little bit too pink, but it's going to get adjusted here as I do more calibration adjustments. But you can see already quite a big difference in the color overall. There it is before, and there it is now. Quite a bit warmer and a little bit more pink, which I'm a personal fan of. A little bit more pink in my sunsets, and magenta. I like that a bit more than I like the yellow and orange. Again, personal preference. For green, I'm actually not going to move the hue at all, but I am going to bump up the saturation. And so I'm going to drag that to, somewhere in the 40s. And as you can see, it's getting more intense in those orange tones. Bottom line is it's a powerful tool, and it really gives you a lot of flexibility for color adjustments, which again, I just absolutely love to do. I'm going to now come into red primary, and I'm going to go a little bit higher on saturation here. So like maybe a 15, 20, something like that. And in this case, no, actually, I'm going to go a little bit higher. I was looking at my notes, and I didn't look at the right place. I'm going to go actually higher to like about 30 or low 30s. So a bit more intensity there. But then again, instead of going to the right, where it gets a little bit more yellow, that looks good. I kind of like that. But I ended up going left, where I get a little bit more of the kind of pink look. And again, that's just personal preference. The good news is you have that flexibility. I go to the right, you get more of that traditional kind of sunset look. You go to the left, I'm getting a little bit more of that kind of pink look, which I like. And now having done that, what I want to do is actually go up here to the shadows and tint those a little bit. And in this case, I tint them a little bit to the right to give them a little bit of that magenta. But again, I just like magenta in sunsets. Now, this color look is something that I like for this particular photo. It may not be necessarily what you like. Maybe you'd come back here on the hue a little bit and go a little bit more to the right. That looks nice as well. Maybe I'll leave it there. Bottom line is you have a lot of flexibility with the calibration tool. And if you look at the before and after, you'll see pretty significant difference in color. That's with everything else that I did, which was the luminosity mask and the color range mask, in addition to the temperature change in the basic tab. But if you look at just calibration before and after, it's a pretty intense sunset, beautiful, warm, glowing colors. And maybe pull the saturation down a little bit. Now that I'm looking at it, I kind of have adjusted the amounts of this differently every time I've done it. There's a little bit tamer version. The bottom line is it's incredibly powerful, and it gives you a lot of flexibility for creating the look that you want. Now, to wrap this up, I'm actually going to go back into masking. And one of the things I like to do is kind of figure out my framing for my photo towards the end of my edit. And that's where masking comes in really well. And in this case, the masking type that I typically use is a linear gradient. The first thing I want to do is come in here about like that and just drop a linear gradient with a nice gradient fade. That's this area here where I'm dragging and creating more space between the two outer lines. That's going to create that fade. And all I want to do is fade that gently because it's going to create a better blend. Very similar to what we did with that fade in the luminosity mask. This gives you a better fade overall into the rest of the image. And I'm just going to darken that area to kind of frame that a little bit down there at the bottom and create a little bit more contrast there to kind of shape it and also kind of direct the eye. There's not really anything super interesting going on in the foreground other than these reflections, I think, of these pockets of light and color. So darkening this area overall, I think, has a nice overall effect. And maybe that's a little too high, or too dark, I should say. Maybe something about like that. And the other thing I like to do is come in and do a similar thing, but with the sky. And that's getting this linear gradient and coming in here and dropping it, again, pretty broad gradient. And I'm going to come in angled like that, kind of playing into the way the clouds are kind of going up to the left, and that color is going up to the left. And here I'm going to take the exposure down just to kind of darken that and frame it a little bit. Maybe not quite that much, maybe about like that, but I also want to make it a little bit more blue. So there's a little bit of reduction in temperature, a little bit of reduction in the light with that mask. And so if you look at the before, it's a little bit brighter and a little bit less blue, of course. And then the after, where I've added the darkening and the blue tint, I think helps. And that plays into what I said earlier, which is using the competing colors, right? The warm and the cool interplay to kind of create a little bit more tension, visual tension in the image. It's something I like to do in my images and something I try to play up in my edits. But if you look at the overall edit before, you can see there's some color in the clouds, but very flat. Raw files are always very flat anyway. I definitely amped this up past the point of what I actually saw. So just to be fair, I'm not a photojournalist. This is not a documentary. This is a creative edit showing you how I can use these tools to create the vision that I have for the photo and bring it to life the way I feel about the image, as opposed to showing you exactly what I saw. But it's creative editing for you and something I like to do. But before and after, very big difference. And you may want to come in and reduce some of the saturation on your own images. It just depends on what look you're going for. I like this look, but more importantly, I like showing how you can do these kind of things in Lightroom because it's very powerful. It gives you a lot of control between the incredibly powerful masking and the color tools, which I didn't even get into all of them. The color grading and the color mixer, especially point color, I adore those. But calibration is my favorite. I use it on just about every image in Lightroom now because I can't seem to stop, because you can do so many things with color. And it's great on landscapes like this, but it's also incredibly useful on cityscapes, because I often find there's a lot of colors I don't like in cityscapes, and calibration is great at helping me overcome those. If you want to see a video about that kind of stuff, leave me a comment down below. I'll be back soon with more Lightroom videos. If you have questions, leave those below as well. Thanks for watching, my friends. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're off to a great start for the new year. And I'll see you really soon. You guys take care, and until next time, adios.